Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I am so self-conscious about how many times I'm going to say more in my talk right now. I hope it's like only once or something. So good afternoon. My name is Yana Kalu. I use they, them pronouns. And got my slides up in a second. But I'm not here to talk about one CEO or what regulation we need. I think there's some really smart experts in the room about this, or ethics boards. We've seen how some folks' ethics boards have lasted about a week. But I'm here to talk to you about, I need to turn that on. Thanks. I'm here to talk to you about the people who are actually building the tech day in and day out. And whether you're an engineer or a developer or not, I am not, it is massively important that to all of us, that the people who are building our tech and know how it works, have some power over the products, the way that the products they build are actually used. So tech worker organizing that we're seeing, it's not just about what we have traditionally thought of as labor practices and working conditions, although that's part of it. But it's about meaningful accountability and resistance to unethical behavior inside our companies, but also in our democracy. Tech workers right now are being paid to build products that are supposed to defend our democracy, but we know are doing the opposite. A huge amount of what we think of as like our civic tech or our government tech is actually running on private products and platforms, AWS. And when our government has no oversight, the organizing that tech workers are doing is actually helping secure democracy more broadly for all of us. So I'm the director of worker engagement and training at coworker.org. And we're a platform that supports employees in really shifting power inside of their workplaces to win positive changes at their jobs. And we are building a labor movement for the 21st century that can make profound shifts. We do it because we believe it can make profound shifts in economic justice and racial and gender justice and away from fascism. For the last 2 years, as part of my job, I have been speaking with tech workers across the country about how to make changes at their jobs when everything that they've tried through the proper channels doesn't work. So people don't talk to me the first time there's like a problem. It's like they've tried every single thing within their companies, oftentimes done a lot within their companies, but come to me when that sort of hasn't worked. And I want to just share about 3 things that I have learned from them and then tell you a little bit of a story about the Google walkout. First, the workers who are doing this kind of workplace organizing are the workers who care the most about tech and about their jobs. They are the people who deeply believe in the mission of tech to connect people, to improve lives, and they are doing the work of ensuring that it actually does that. They're devoted employees, they're people that have been there the longest, and I believe that they are a company's greatest asset. Second, and this is probably more of a, I think reflecting, it's more of a question than something I've learned, but in this country, you know, we believe in democracy, we believe in it for ourselves, we believe in it for other folks, we believe in it so strongly that we safeguard it at home and support others in maintaining it and securing it. And we often believe that representation that's accountable to the folks who are the most affected is a really profound principle, that we are the experts in our own lives and our own experiences. But conflict and debate are inherent to this democracy. It's a necessary part of the process in determining the best outcomes for those impacted. But we don't have democratic workplaces. Why is workplace democracy so feared instead of valued? Many of us in this room here also have like really incredible jobs, well-paying, and we're all doing the work to really understand the different relationship we have to the access and privilege it's allowed us to do this. We can say with relative confidence that also many tech workers, and not all, there's a lot of invisible sort of precarious labor that's involved in the tech industry, as we know, but many tech workers have some of the cushiest jobs and feel like the most empowered or even maybe entitled, we can say, to like advocate for the things that they need the most. And we can shrug this complaining off or these gripes off as first world problems. But these workers have been listening to leadership use ethical tech and AI ethics thrown around without real systems for accountability for change over and over. They watched as ethics boards were formed, recently the Office of Ethical and Humane Use at Salesforce and Ether at Microsoft, be susceptible to continuing to greenlight contracts with ICE and Customs and Border Patrol while those agencies engaged in some of the most egregious human rights violations in our time, separating children from families at the border. But tech workers are organizing. This is not an industry, as we know, that has a foundation in unionism or labor in general. So how did this kind of start coming about? We're hearing about this over and over in an industry without this foundation. Well, I can tell you how the 75 tech workers I sat with in a room in Brooklyn last year told me they felt about their jobs. They're feeling like they're not being told what they're actually working on. They know that sexual harassment is a massive issue and people feel pressure to say something when it happens to them, but they know it's not worth the personal cost and structural injustice on top of the original injustice that often follows. They feel intimidated and prevented from meaningfully supporting tech's underclass of contractors who are treated and paid like second-class citizens across tech campuses. There's a lack of transparency and fairness around leveling and promotions that disproportionately impacts folks of color, folks who are trans, folks who are not 20 to 25 years old. They're scared to take their generous parental paid leave policies because they know what actually taking it will mean. And they have ethical and political conflicts with their work. I suspect that they're not alone, and it is no mystery to me why tech workers want more of a voice in making their workplaces better. But since no one individually has the power to make these kinds of changes, how is this change happening? Often we feel like these issues are not our area of expertise, or you don't work on the team that's actually dealing with building semi-autonomous weapons, or it's not related to what you specifically work on, or you feel like even your manager or CEO doesn't have the power to actually transform this larger problem. So how have tech workers then charted a path forward and moved their CEOs to do the right thing? So I want to share a story with you, and we all know a lot about what's been happening at Google, and I'm not telling you this story just to pick Google out. In fact, Google, and I think those of you, if there's anyone who works for Alphabet knows this, is absolutely full of brilliant and extremely ethical people who are working really, really hard to create space for people to have these kinds of conversations at work. But I want to talk about Google because what's happening there is really incredible. But this didn't start with the walkout or not renewing the Project Maven contract. All of this work became possible because underrepresented groups inside the company had a deep sense of the ways in which the non-human components of work could be turned against humans. Over a year before the walkout, I was supporting a group of workers who had been harassed so severely on their internal platforms, were experiencing death threats and being doxxed by their coworkers. And these were diversity advocates. These were folks who were standing up for their particular positions. Were experiencing personal harm over the direct effects of having their internal tech used for harm. While Google and HR refused to deal with those problems occurring on their own technology. So it kind of begs the question, if they can't get it right internally, right, with this many people, then how can we expect them to do this for the rest of us? But these workers were the ones who really were situated to understand the negative impact of these products. They reached out to us and we supported their efforts to demand accountability and say that enough is enough. We cannot say any longer with confidence that free speech is always good, that there's no such thing as bad speech. And in order to address the problem of harassment, Googlers had to start getting organized amongst themselves and know what could fix this. So they said, we need content moderation. We need policies that make clear that these kinds of threats are absolutely unacceptable, that these folks shouldn't be able to keep their jobs and do this. For many of these years, these employees have been performing the unpaid labor of equity work for years. Those of you who are doing this, you know what it's like. When it didn't challenge Google's ideology or business model, it was all okay. But when it started to bump up against that, that's when things changed. So this is kind of what was going on before the walkout. The walkout wasn't this like spontaneous moment of outrage just at the payouts for sexual harassers. It was made possible because it was the result of a lot of work and a lot of organizing over many years. It was possible because tech workers were getting offline and meeting in off-corp spaces and meeting in person with groups like the Tech Workers Coalition to talk about themselves as workers and talk about themselves as workers who have power. There's a chapter of tech workers in New York City. If anyone's interested, you can find me. So outside stakeholders and journalists and investors were also groups that were really influential, that we helped them connect with to leverage power and win some of the policy changes that we've seen. So the learning that they did in kind of building power around their own working conditions really set them up to be able to challenge these larger things like these kinds of products that actually are harming democracy. So we know that tech companies are in a pivotal moment. And as we look out at the ecosystem of stakeholders who are deeply invested in keeping tech accountable to our world, we're seeing ex-executives who are experiencing deep regret over the impact. We're seeing elected officials really start to grapple with what regulation actually means. And we're seeing scholars and obviously like communities of color and trans folks and advocates being repeatedly forced to do the work of reminding tech leaders that we are disproportionately impacted by algorithmic decision-making, et cetera. But I would argue that it is tech workers who have been the ones to start achieving real accountability that takes into account the most impacted people. It's tech workers who, after literally the highest court in our land said that it was absolutely okay to engage in forced arbitration as a condition of our employment, said like, absolutely not, we are not having this. We're not gonna suffer silently with no recourse anymore. It's tech workers who lifted up the gaps between a company's stated values about diversity and their own lived experiences and got policy changed. It's tech workers who are highlighting the difference between accountability and closed-door decision-making processes that disproportionately impact vulnerable communities. It's tech workers who said, we don't want to build a search engine in China that lets the government surveil its users. It's tech workers who have built powerful alliances with shareholders because risks to underrepresented workers are also risks to companies, are also risks to our communities. It's tech workers who said, we did not sign up to build weapons, and it's not okay that we only learned that we're doing this after reading about it on the front page of the Times. It's tech workers that said Google cannot appoint a leader who works every day to deny people like me, queer and trans people, my people, our rights to their AI ethics board. And we just saw yesterday how Google employees and YouTube employees protested a decision to allow a racist, homophobic person on the platform, and that got over change. But that was workers also joining in that cacophony and saying, we disagree with our employer, right? And this takes a ton of courage. What these courageous employers are doing is actually taking up the larger public interest at sometimes like a great personal peril to themselves. So I think that we owe them our deepest gratitude. I owe them my deepest gratitude. They've rightly earned overwhelming public support, but that's certainly not their experiences of showing up at work every day, as you can imagine. But this movement has shown us that we all need to be challenging and changing the parts of our work lives that are broken, as our co-founder says. The stakes are super high. It matters for every single one of us that the people building the tech are able to hold it to outcomes. So we are just at the beginning. Workers at the Tech Workers Coalition and several other groups are expanding the terrain of where we can make change in our own workplaces. And Coworker is here to really help move that process along. So at Coworker, we provide a few things like workplace education for workers who want to make tech more accountable. We're specifically working with employees in the tech sector. That's what I do, and have a team of folks who are working on this. We offer employment and labor rights training. We offer legal research and skills building, media training to help workers be more confident when they are engaging in critical whistleblowing work to our democracy. And we do this because we are trying to help the people who care the most connect to their coworkers to build the power they need to have the difficult conversations that make tech accountable. It is really easy to ignore one person. It's really easy to fire one person, but it's really hard to ignore the majority of your workforce. So if you know a tech worker or are a tech worker who wants to make positive change at your job, our team of labor experts wants to do everything we can to support you in making the tech that you work on more accountable to all of us. Thank you so much.